This is Lecture 107 in the ABCs of Communism series, one of several that accompanies Volume 7 on Communism in Europe, which will appear later this year. Our topic this morning is the early slave stage in Italy. Now, in Lecture 101, we reviewed the Neolithic Revolution of the late Neolithic in the Aosta Valley, Piedmont, Liguria, Tuscany, and Sardinia that were in the ATC stage, featuring megalith archaeology. In the Bronze Age, this megalithic architecture became monumental in Latium, Puglia, and Sicily by 5000 BP. Now, as we have seen, copper tools were widespread among the late Neolithic, Remadello, Rinaldone, and Gaudo people in the present-day regions of Lombardy, Tuscany, Latium, and Campania, and in the Laterza culture in Apulia and Basilicata. The people of Sardinia, the Conil Mortecchio culture in Abruzzo and Marche, the Serraferlicchio culture in Sicily, and the Spilimberto group in Emilia-Romagna are all representative of that stage. The emergence of the Italian ATC, that is, Advanced Theocratic Chiefdom stage, is confirmed with the erection of the first tall stone menhirs by the people of northern Italy and Sardinia during this period, and at this early Bronze Age time, the bell beaker traders arrived in Italy, having originated, as you recall, in the Portuguese ATC near Lisbon. Now, I think that the religion of the ATC stage featured not just the monumental architecture of the menhir type, but the Erdfield burial custom of two-part, cone-shaped, that is, biconical containers. Then decoration indicates a preoccupation with water. The North Italian environment of the late Bronze Age and the succeeding Iron Age makes this interpretation plausible. That is, the Erdfield cultural pattern is associated with a wetter climatic period than the earlier tumulus cultures. Furthermore, forest clearance was intensive in the Erdfield period. Open meadows were created for the first time. This meant water control from rain that led to increased erosion, and sediment load of the rivers had to be a preoccupation. On these new lands, wheat, barley, pulses, horse beans, and poppies for oil and as a drug were cultivated. Now, these people cultivated forests of hazelnuts, apples, pears, sloes, and acorns. As importantly, grazing fields were created for cattle, sheep, and goats. Pigs, small horses, and geese were penned, and dogs were kept as well. Wool was spun, and spindle whorls are common, and then woven on a warp-weighted loom. Bronze needles were used for sewing. Wool replaced flax for clothing. The diagnostic features of the ATC religion continued into the slave stage, including the burial of urns in fields and structures. Now it's time to turn our attention to the first kingdoms in Italy, this being another way of saying it is time to turn our attention to the transformation of the Advanced Theocratic Chiefdom stage to that of the stage of slavery. Beginning in North Italy, the farming culture centered on contemporary Brescia extended from eastern Lombardy and Veneto to Emilia and Romagna. It took original form around 4300 BP when people from the transalpine regions of Switzerland and southern Germany arrived. Their settlements consisted of stilt houses, usually called pile dwellings in the scholarly literature. These houses were erected on marshy lands, not over water, and set on piles to protect against occasional flooding. Because the nearby lakes have grown in size over time, many of the original piles are now underwater. The Lombard economy was agricultural and pastoral, supplemented by hunting and fishing. Now, the period from 4300 to 3000 BP was a period when villages became cities. This early urbanization featured large, simple chiefdom communities simply because the population expanded, being fueled by the advancing agricultural economy. In its more advanced form, there was an intensification of in situ production and concomitant settlement planning that accompanied the emergence of the Advanced Theocratic Chiefdom stage. The first pile-dwelling communities in this region are known archaeologically as the Melodic Culture. It dates to the early Bronze Age, that is 4300 to 3700 BP. The Melodic Culture's most important settlements were around the Lake Garda In the Garda Hills and in the Barrick Euganeo district, many stilt houses have been recovered, containing a large number of potsherds, bronze artifacts, and objects made of bone, wood, and fabric. The latter have survived because of the anaerobic environmental conditions. In the Middle and Late Bronze Age, from 3700 to 3200 BP, the number of stilt houses declined, being substituted by structures called terra maricola. The name derives from the archaeological site of the Terra Mara Santa Rosa. It is a Middle and Late Bronze Age archaeological site located in the Po River alluvial plain of northern Italy. In actuality, it is the site of two moated villages. Earthen ramparts delimit these villages. Fine textured floodplain deposits seal the housing structures of the site. The 33 acres occupied by them, their shape and their relation to moats and the fluvial networks proves ATC landscape management, especially of water resources. The Santa Rosa site sits on a favorable geomorphologic position at the top of a crevasse lobe of the adjoining Po River Paleochannel. Rising above the surrounding alluvial plain, this channel. Now, the Terra Mara Santa Rosa ATC has an excellent urban design, diverting water from Paleochannel and the Po River through peripheral moats. The latter were used to collect water around the site and then distribute it to the surrounding fields for irrigation. This water management doctrine was copied throughout the region. Many investigators believe it was the first and therefore the archetype of irrigation agriculture in Western Europe. If this is the case, we are seeing the reason why it is in Italy where the most important slave stage kingdoms would arise and the eventual Roman form spread across the continent. Evidence of this slave stage manifestation has been found in the Valle Grande Veronese and Polesine, and on the northeastern borders of the Veneto plain. Particularly important was the Polata preceding site of Peschiera del Garda that became a factory town for the production of bronze weapons and tools, as well as the manufacture of clothing. Their products were exported across the entire Italian territory, Central Europe, and the Balkans. This expansion in trading with Adriatic customers in these products and Valpadana cheese was accompanied by hired thugs to protect that cargo and returning products. Anyway, in 3200 BP, the ATC of Terra Maricola villages collapsed in rank war. From it, the masses of disgruntled farmers and specialists cut and ran to a new, more socially amenable situation. Along the socio-cultural way, many class-divided, state-organized kingdoms arose as urban settlements along the rivers and the main roads. Among these are the remains found in the archaeological sites of Montagna Borgo Zeno and Este Canavedo in the southern part of the Colle Ugane and that of Fratesina di Frata Polesine. Here archaeologists have found factory workshops that would have produced huge quantities of objects in horn, bone, ivory, amber, and glass. Fratesina was the center of a very big communications network that expanded in the Baltic area, in the Aegean Sea, and on the African coast. Now, during these centuries, that is 3200 to 3000 BP, a new homogeneous culture developed along the entire Italian peninsula. This is called Proto-Villanovan culture, represented in Veneto by Proto-Villanovan houses, and necropoli at Fratesina Nardi, Fondo Zanotto, and Santa Giorgio di Angarano in Valsugana, characterized by corpse incineration. A transformation occurs between 3000 and 2800 BP, and from this emerged the Etruscans, the Latins, the Umbrians, and the Venetians. It was not long until these class-divided, state-organized peoples built the modern cities of Este, Padua, Treviso, Vicenza, Altino, and Oderzo. The tradition of corpse incineration continues, as does the construction of fancy necropoli and sanctuaries, full of rich bronze offerings. Diagnostic figures were diffused throughout the whole Adriatic basin. By 2600 BP, Europe's earliest written documents were produced in several of these cities. From these documents, we know people were using an Indo-European language very similar to Latin. In Veneto, the people shared the territory with Rhetic groups in the Prealps of Vicenza, and Etruscan communities emerged along the southern border. Furthermore, Greeks occupied barrios of the Iron Age port of Adria, along with merchants from a variety of different ethnic groups, including Venetians and Celts. What we see, therefore, is a massive trade economy extending as far as Cornwall, from where tin was imported in exchange for ceramic products. And that brings us to the Melodic Culture, originating in the transition period between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and it occupied Trentino and part of South Tyrol. It was succeeded in the Iron Age from the Frisian Sentinel culture. And then Venice. The name Venetia, or Venice, derives from the Roman name for the people known as the Veneti, and called by the Greeks Editoi. The meaning of the word is beloved, lovable, or friendly. A connection with the Latin word venetus, meaning color sea blue, is also implied. Oral history and historical evidence agree that the original population of Venice consisted of refugees from Roman cities near Venice, including Padua, Aquileia, Treviso, Altino, and Concordia, that is modern Porto Gruaro. Farmers from the undefended countryside, fleeing successive waves of invasion, found refuge as fisher folk in the marshes, lagoons, and many islands and islets off the coast. Here, the 12 founding apostolic families of Venice elected their first doge as the commercial chief of a de facto kingdom. The traditional founding is said to have taken place at the stroke of noon on 25 March A.D., the Feast of the Annunciation. Now that brings us to Trieste. Since the 2nd millennium B.C., Trieste was an inhabited site, originally an Illyrian settlement. The Veneti entered the region in the 10th to 9th centuries B.C. and seem to have given the town its name. Tergeste, from Turg, which is a Venetic word meaning market. Still later, the town was captured by the Cana, a tribe of the Eastern Alps, before becoming part of the Roman Republic in 177 B.C. during the Istrian War. Between 52 and 46 B.C., it was granted the status of a Roman colony under Julius Caesar, who recorded its name as Tergeste in his Commentaria de Bello Gallico. He wrote or published at least in 51 B.C. his work, which recounts events of the Gallic Wars. In imperial times, the border of Roman Italy moved through the Timavo River to Formione, today Risano. Roman Tergeste flourished due to its position on the road from Aquileia, the main Roman city in the area, to Istria, and is a port, now some ruins of which are still visible. Emperor Augustus built a line of walls around the city in 33 to 32 BC, while Trajan built a theater in the 2nd century AD. Then the citizens of the town were enrolled in the tribe Pupinia. In 27 BC, Trieste was incorporated as Region 10 of Augustan Italy. In the early Christian era, Trieste continued to flourish between AD 138 and 161. Its territory was enlarged, and nearby Carnae and Catalae were granted Roman citizenship by the Roman Senate and Emperor Antonius Pius, at the pleading of the leading Tergestine citizen, the Quaestor Urbanus, Fabius Severus. Terra Mare, as we've seen, was a Middle and Late Bronze Age stilt house village, and it had practiced agriculture between the 36th and 32nd centuries BP. This is an area in what is now Pianura Padana along the Panaro River between Modena and Bologna. The population reached more than 120,000 individuals at the beginning of the Late Bronze Age. As the Terra Mare people evolved from simple to an ATC, the main settlements grew as large as 30 acres with 1,500 to 2,000 people, surrounded by smaller villages. All the main settlements were fortified. Now, capital was accumulated by the high ranks through trade, especially the brokerage business in amber from the Baltic to tin from Erzeburge. Terramara's situation on the Po River allowed for storage and protection of cargo from Val Camonica to the eastern Mediterranean Sea and Greece. In the 32nd century BP, the Terramare ATC collapsed in civil war. The main settlements were abandoned and their composite populations moved southward, where they intermarried with the Apennine people. This abandonment of the Po Valley for the south may have formed the basis of the Tyrrhenian culture. If so, it led to the historic Etruscans. And that brings us to the Mediterranean islands of Sardinia and Corsica. In early Middle Bronze Age Sardinia and southern Corsica, the Nuragic ATC, soon to be kingdom, arose in 3800 BP and continued until the 2nd century AD. The Nuragic towers are the best preserved and largest megalithic ATC remains in Europe. Both of these islands evolved class-divided, state-organized slave stage kingdoms from their megalithic ATC base. The ruling Sardinians accumulated great wealth by naval trading with other Mediterranean peoples. Nuragic archaeology shows amber coming from the Baltic Sea, bronze figurines of African animals, ingots and weapons from the eastern Mediterranean, and Mycenaean ceramics. Their adventures led some of their more daring captains to attack Egypt. ATC temples called the Holy Wells, dedicated to the cult of holy waters, and the Giant's Grave, the Megaron temples, are monumental architecture with bronze figurines. These figurines occur in the Etruscan tombs, linking that religion to the emergence of the Etruscan early kingdom, as do the giants of Monte Prama, perhaps the oldest anthropomorphic statues of the western Mediterranean Sea. On Sicily, the Bronze Age Sicily, the cultures of Castelluccio and Thapsos marked the early and late phases of the southeastern part of the island. Arriving on the northwest and southwest coasts of the island at this time were the Bell-Beaker traders. The nearby Aeolian Islands featured the Capo Graziano and Melodic cultures. Arising thereon was the Ausonio culture and its phases 2 and 1. Now, in central Italy, the Apennine culture of central and southern Italy includes the preceding Proto-Apennine B and following sub-Apennine phases of the Bronze Age. These people were cattle herdsmen grazing their herds in the meadows and groves of mountainous central Italy, including the Capitoline Hill at Rome, where their ceramics occur in the earliest archaeological strata. They lived in small villages, but when traveling between summer pastures, they built temporary camps or lived in caves and rock shelters. As these people evolved, as in the chiefdom stages sites like Coppa Navigata demonstrate, construction of well-defended and large coastal locales. In them, as ATCs, resources of the land and sea were exploited, and a variety of professionally specialized industries emerged, such as those involved in the production of textile dye. And that brings us to the Cana culture. The Cana culture developed from the Middle Bronze Age at 2300 BP until the Iron Age in the Pianura Padana. In what is now western Lombardy, eastern Piedmont, and Tieno, it takes its name from the township of Canagrate that exhibits 50 tombs with ceramics and metal artifacts. It represents another migratory wave from the northwest part of the Alps through the Alpine passes. As we have seen, people had already penetrated and settled in the western Po Valley between Lake Maggiore and Lake Como. Canagrate terracotta is very similar to that known from the same period north to the Alps in Provence, Savoy, Isère, and Valais, and the area of Rhine, Switzerland, in eastern France. The Proto-Villanovan culture was a culture at the end of the Bronze Age from the 12th to 10th century BC, widespread in much of the Italian peninsula and northeastern Sicily, including the Aeolian Islands, and it was characterized by the funeral ritual of incineration. The ashes of the deceased were placed into biconical urns decorated with geometric patterns. Their settlements were often located on the top of the hills and protected by stone walls. and they evolved in time into the Villanova culture. The name of this Iron Age civilization derives from a locality in the Frazione Castellaso of Bologna with a necropoli. It succeeded the Proto-Villanovan culture during the Iron Age in the territory of Tuscany and northern Lazio, and spread into Romagna, Campania, and Fermo in the Marche. The main diagnostic of the Villanovans was their incinerated sepulchres, in which the dead's ashes were housed in biconical urns and buried. These burial characteristics for the Villanovan culture are the same as those of the Central European Urnfield culture, 3300 to 2750 BP, and its successor Hallstatt culture. The Villanovan were initially devoted to agriculture and breeding with a simplified social order. Later, specialized craftsmanship activities such as metallurgy and ceramics created an accumulation of riches which caused the appearance of social stratification. Now, the Gola Secca culture is an Iron Age culture on the northwestern Po Plain that takes its name from Gola Secca next to Tieno, where 50 tombs with ceramics and metal artifacts were initially recovered. The Gola Secca culture spans an area of 20,000 square kilometers from the Alps between the Po, Cesio, and Serio rivers, and it dates from the 9th to the 4th centuries BC. Its origins trace from the Cana and the Proto-Gallo-Secca culture of the 12th to 10th centuries BC. The Gola Secca ATC kingdom traded with the Etruscans and the Hallstatt in the north. As a kingdom, its merchants traded with goods of oil, wine, bronze, and ceramics with buyers and sellers in Greece and northern Europe, especially tin and amber from the Baltic coast. A Gola Secca tomb in Pombia contained the oldest known common hop beer in the world. The Camuni lived in Val Camonica, northern Lombardy during the Iron Age. They evolved from hunter-gatherers into tribal agriculture and passed through both chiefdom stages before reaching the height of their power as an Iron Age kingdom. The slavocrat bosses owning the iron mills in Val Camonica accumulated enormous amounts of capital. In the pre-Roman period, Castellieri is a town in the province of Frosinone in the Italian region of Lazio, in the valley of the Liri, 56 miles southeast of Rome. The Castellieri culture in Istria of the mid-Bronze Age expanded into Friuli, the modern Venetia Giulia, Dalmatia, and the neighboring areas. It lasted for more than a millennium, from 3500 BP until the Roman conquest of 2300 BP, and it takes its name from the fortified Castellieri boroughs that are diagnostic. The first Castellieri were built along the Istrian coasts as advanced theocratic chiefdoms with megaliths. These Castellieri were fortified, inhabited boroughs located on hills or mountains or in plains, as at Friuli. They had one or more concentric walls, rounded or elliptical in shape, as in Istria, and Venezia's Giulia, or quadrangular, as in Friuli. 100 Castellieri have been discovered in Istria, Friuli, and Venezia Giulia, such as that of Lemmi in west-central Istria, of Elergi near Muggia, of Monte Giove near Trieste, and San Paolo, not far from Monfalcone. However, the largest Castellieri was perhaps that of Nesactum in southern Istria, not far from Pula. The Etruscans started from the 8th century BC and created a slave stage kingdom. They began on the Tyrian coast of central Italy and later expanded to Anulia in northern Italy and Campania. It evolved from the Iron Age Villanovan kingdom. The Etruscan polity was a powerful and wealthy slave stage landlocked kingdom of central Italy. It corresponds in the area of Tuscany south of the Arno River, western Umbria, and northern central Lazio. Culture that is identifiably Etruscan developed in Italy after about 800 BC. It had a unique language we know from inscriptions dating from 700 BC. Its maximum extent occurred during the foundational period of Rome and the Roman kingdom. Then the Etruscan kingdom administered three confederacies of cities. The first was Etruria, that is Tuscany, Latium, and Umbria. The second, the Po Valley with the eastern Alps, and thirdly, Campania. By 500 BC, the political destiny of Italy had passed from Etruscan hands as its conquest and assimilation into the Roman Republic was beginning. The last Etruscan cities were formally absorbed by Rome around 100 BC. Although the Etruscans developed a system of writing, the Etruscan language remains only partly understood. Politics was kinship-based, centered on small cities. As their ATC stage evolved into class-divided, state-organized, slave-stage kingdom status, the Etruscan elite grew very rich through trade. Their locale in central Italy made trade with the Celtic world to the north and the Greeks to the south logical. The rich filled their large family tombs with imported luxury. Archaic Greece had a huge influence on their art and architecture, and Greek mythology was evidently very familiar to them. Brings us to Florence. The Etruscans started the small settlement of Fiesole in 200 BC. It was destroyed by Lucius Cornelius Sulla in 80 BC in reprisal for supporting the Populares faction in Rome. The city of Fluentia, that is Florence, was established in Fiesole's place by Julius Caesar in 59 BC. It was one of the many veterans administration type of homes for his legion's vets. It was built in the style of an army camp, with the main streets, the Cardo and the Decumanus, intersecting at the present Piazza della Repubblica. Situated along the Via Cassia, the main route between Rome and the north, and within the fertile valley of the Arno, the settlement quickly became an important commercial center. Other people settling to their north included the Ligurians, who lived in what are now Liguria, southern Piedmont, and the southern French coast, and the Leponte, Insubres, Orobe in Piedmont and Lombardy, the Veneti of northeastern Italy. In the peninsula, alongside the Etruscans, lived numerous people such as the Umbri in Umbria and northern Abruzzo, and the Latins who created the Roman civilization. The region is named for the Umbri people and absorbed by the expansion of Rome. The Umbri capital city was Gubbio. Their language was Umbrian, related to Latin and Oscan. The Umbrio evolved from the Terra Mara and Proto-Villanovan culture in northern and central Italy, and at the beginning of the Bronze Age. The Etruscans were the chief enemies of the Umbri. The Etruscan invasion went from the western seaboard towards the north and east from 700 to 500 BC, eventually driving the Umbrians toward the Apennine uplands and capturing 300 Umbrian towns. Nevertheless, the Umbrian population remained in the conquered districts. The border between Etruria and Umbria was the Tiber River. After the downfall of the Etruscans, Umbrians aided the Samnites in their struggle against Rome in 308 BC. Later communication with Samnium were impeded by the Roman fortress of Narnia that was built in 298 BC. The Romans defeated the Samnites and their allies in the Battle of Sentinel in 295 BC. Allied Umbrians and Etruscans had to return to their territories to defend them against simultaneous Roman attacks, and unable to help the Samnites in the Battle of Sentinel. The Roman victory at Sentinel started a period of integration under the Roman rulers who established some colonies, for example Spoletium, and built the Via Flaminia in 220 BC. The Via Flaminia became a principal vector for Roman development in Umbria. During Hannibal's invasion in the Second Punic War, the Battle of Lake Trasimene was fought in Umbria, but the local people did not aid the invader. The Latins were originally a tribe in ancient and central Italy from Latium in present-day Lazio. Through the conquest of their most populous kingdom, Rome, the Latins united all Italic tribes into one group. Then Romanization, or Latinization, spread across their empire to Spain, Portugal, France, and Romania. All of these people found resistance to be futile and joined Italy in becoming Latin. Assimilation was rather easy for them, as the languages spoken in these countries derived primarily from the Latin language. Later, other people settled in the Italian territory, cohabiting with the previous inhabitants. New tribes of Celts in the north, Senones, Boii, and Lingones, the Greeks and the Phoenicians in the south, and in parts of Sicily and Sardinia, were incorporated. In South Italy, emerging in the south of the Italian peninsula, were the Sabellians, Folecii, Volsii, and Ascii in the Latium, the Piacenni in the Marche and northeast Abruzzo, Samnites in southern Abruzzo, Molise and Campania, and Daunians, Messapi, and Pusetae formed the Apulian Confederation, and the Lucani and Bruti joined in later on. In 4000 BP, the Palma Campania culture began with early Bronze Age Naples. It gets its name from the locality of Palma Campania. Many villages of this culture were buried under volcanic ash after an eruption of Mount Vesuvius that occurred at that time. The earliest founding of Naples, and named Falerone after the heroic sailor Phaleros, one of Jason's Argonauts. What we know is that settlers from two cities in Euboea, Greece, colonized the Neapolitan suburb of Cumae as the earliest Greek city on mainland Italy. Around this time, Greeks became locked in a power struggle with the Etruscans, who sought to dominate the area. Etruscans launched a failed attack on Cumae in 524 BC. Thereafter, commerce involving Cumae was devastated, and the city eventually collapsed. The city was relocated inland at Neapolis, or Naples, leaving the old Cumae hill called Parthenope as the Old City. Neapolis had a powerful line of walls in front of which the Carthaginian invader Hannibal had to retreat when Naples was allied with the Romans. From that time forward, Naples acquired permanence as a slave-stage kingdom, changing hands from one slavocrat gang to another for centuries. In the Roman era, Naples flourished. The pleasant climate made it a renowned resort with luxurious villas that dotted the coast from the Gulf of Pozzuoli to the Sorrentine Peninsula. The famous district of Posillipo takes its name from the ruins of Villa Posillipan. The Roman government connected the city to the rest of Italy with their famous roads. Excavated galleries linked Naples to Pozzuoli. Roman engineers enlarged the port and added public baths and aqueducts. The city was celebrated for its many feasts and spectacles. The saints Peter and Paul came to the city to preach. Christians had a prominent role in the late years of the Roman Empire, and accordingly there are catacombs in the northern part of the city, and Christian basilicas were built next to their entrances. So that brings us to a conclusion of our discussion of ATC's kingdoms in Italy. And next we're going to have 2 lectures on Rome.